I believe, therefore I understand. That's something that Augustine said. I believe, therefore I understand. Does that sound backwards? It did to me. But I think Augustine's onto something. If you believe in science, then it means you can study it and become adept at it. If you believe in higher things like justice or forgiveness or divine truth or grace or love, then you can study those things and become adept at them. But you have to believe in them first. So there's a minimum amount of knowledge that's needed to live a spiritual life, to really believe in God. You have to have that minimum amount of knowledge. It's essential. And it's really important to have that information as early as you can in your mind. And that knowledge in your mind actually is a part of your soul, right? It moves from your mind into your heart. It's a part of who you are. There's no real separation there. Your mind is a part of your soul. And this is how catechism works, or Christian instruction, and why it's so really important. Because the way to begin to understand God and his world is to know what he says about himself. I believe, therefore I understand. I think Augustine's onto something. So every week I'm going to do a lesson just like this, just a few minutes on a topic of Christian knowledge, something that God has revealed to the world in Jesus, so that you can have what you need to begin understanding the things in the world the way that God's people are supposed to understand them. And I think this is going to be really good for you, just like it's been really good for me and my family. Now you might think, my life is not really about spiritual stuff for the most part. So I'm not sure how important this is. Let me see if I can give you a little picture of how catechesis, instruction for your spirit, is important. Maybe you're someone who values physical well-being, right? You go to the gym a lot, or you run, and so you're willing to make a priority of taking care of your body. Would you agree that what you do with your body is actually determined by your mind, right? I mean, it's your mind that decides whether or not you're going to go out, what you're going to do. Research is the best kind of exercise, is the best kind of diet, right? So the body is kind of like ordered upward by the mind. And now, what determines how your mind thinks, what you pursue with your mind, what's important to you? Well, your mind, what you do with your mind is determined by your morality. That's going to order it upward, hopefully. It's a good morality, right? Whatever you believe is good and whatever you believe is bad and evil. And so, what determines your morality? How do you know what's good and evil? How do you know what you should do with your mind and your body and what you shouldn't? Well, your morality, what you believe is good and evil, is determined by your spirituality. So, how's your spirituality? Because it's going to influence everything in your whole life. So, I'd encourage you not to miss a single one of these, and I'm going to always try my best to make sure that they're really good stuff. You might not always understand stuff the first time. I certainly never do. All the best books I have, I've had to read like 2 or 3 or 4 times. But you know what happens? Keep in mind that this stuff is like seeds that goes into your mind, and it stays there. It stays there like a seed. One day you'll be amazed at what comes from it. Okay, so do you know there's actually 4 kinds of education? 3 kinds, maybe 4 kinds. And they're kind of like, and the reason I'm doing this from here is, Eric, would you play a C? And now a D, E, and then F. Okay, now I don't know if you noticed, but those are 4 notes. And the 3rd and the 4th one, the difference between an E and an F is actually half what it is between a C and a D and a D and an E. It's a half step. I never knew that before. I learned that at one point. But I show you that because it's sort of like the 4 types of education. And they are, the first one's a pragmatic education. You're probably familiar with that. It's the type of education your kids probably get in school, that you might have got at college. It's the kind of thing that prepares you to be able to do something. And it's very just it's practical, which is a good thing about it. But it's basically pragmatic. It's so that you can have a job, or just know what you need to know in order to make money and sort of be successful in that sense. But you may be familiar with schools that teach a second kind of education. And it's different from the first one, just like a C is different from a D, or a D is different from a C. You might call it a traditional education. And so some schools want to make sure that you understand history and what it means to be American, and be able to kind of be part of our civilization in furthering, in this case, our Western heritage. And so some schools think that's really important, and they'll give you more than just a pragmatic education. They'll also give you sort of a traditional education. And then there's another type of education which is different from that still. Just like an E is a full step away from a D note. And you might call that a philosophical education. And what a philosophical education will do is it will teach you the underlying understanding of what is the difference between a good thing and a bad thing. And so it won't just teach the American tradition, for instance, to say this is the best, It'll say, hey, there are good things about the American tradition. And then there might also be things not so good. And here's how you know. It'll teach you philosophy, the love of reason, of wisdom. So those are kind of three very different types of education. And you can find those kind of in different types of schools, although in the past there was more of a focus on philosophical education. And then there's a fourth kind I said, which was like the difference between an E and an F. And it's like a half-step difference maybe between from a philosophical education. And that's what you might call a Christian education. An introduction into the one who is wisdom, but it puts a name on it, and it's Jesus. So why do I share that all with you on this introduction to the catechism and to our learning the basics of Christian instruction? Well, because there's kind of reasons for taking this class along each of those lines, right? There's a pragmatic reason. Do you know that a higher percentage of people who attend new member class, who have instruction like this, stay in church, attend church more regularly? They attend church more regularly. They're more participatory in church. They give more, they receive more, they pray more. And so there's just kind of a pragmatic reason for taking instruction. There's also a traditional reason, right? You get to learn and be a part of the historical reality of Christianity, a part of the community, and a part of the tradition, and of being a Lutheran in particular, which is really a really cool and specific tradition. And this gives you a community, but also just a sense of identity, and it's a good one. And then there's also a philosophical reason for doing this, because we're going to equip one another with the tools to dialogue and test and grow in wisdom and grace and truth. And of course, it's a Christian education. We're going to talk about, in all of these things, the one who is the eternal Word of God, the Logos, the wisdom of God. He is grace and truth. And in Jesus, we find all real judgment and all salvation. And we find out how to reveal those things to the world. So I look forward to this class with you. And I'll just close this way. May the Lord be with you and yours.
If you're wondering how Pastor Steve gets so smart, or you'd like to know more about Christian education, check out the Searcy Institute. They're up in Concord, North Carolina, believe it or not. And they have a lot of resources online. Specifically, the Ask Andrew podcast is really wonderful. And then, of course, keep watching our catechesis videos and our Christian instruction here on our YouTube site or on Facebook, ALC Charlotte.